situation with the West right now. They don't know what they're doing.
And I wouldn't
totally disgusted.
Yeah, I wouldn't think that the population in the West here would give into the calls to send their young boys and girls overseas to fight a land war with Russia. But then when I see this hypnotism, right, it was coronavirus, then it was the vaccine, and then really quickly it became Ukraine. And it's fascinating to see the complete movement without a second to reflect on what's happening, into the next thing that's put in front of them in this mass hypnosis formation that I see happening here. And I had this theory that what we're seeing now, because it seems like the left and the right poles have switched. And I think that the neoconservative movement just went underground and now is popping up as the left now, right? Because you're seeing the people on the left being Russia-phobic. They're being for the central intelligence and the national security state, when that used to be the anathema to the left. And now they're all for it.
Exactly.
So
They've changed places. Yeah,
I think they're neocons in sheep's clothing. And the thing that the undergirding it is this Russia is bad thing. I mean, we saw with Trump in office, how it was always, it was always Putin that got him in office, and the elections were rigged because, it was influenced, by Putin. But if you say that now, you can't even say that on social media. So it's interesting that you can say 1,000 times over that Trump was an illegitimate president because the election was rigged because of Putin and his, blogs or whatnot. It was never censored. Now you can't even mention it. They had Trump was on a podcast, and he just mentioned once I can't even say it, that the election was X, Y, and Z, and they kicked it off YouTube. So it's interesting to see those dichotomies, but I want to drill in a little bit here, right? Because I have this similar sentiments that you do, and I know there's a lot of people that do, and we live in the West. So when we said that the West is through and the West is on its descent, what do you mean by the West?
West is Euro-American civilization, the whole package.
But you're part of it. I'm part of it, right? We have different views, right? So,
sure.
What is it?
But I'm a kind of internal proletariat of the West, which is to say, though, as Toynbee defined, an internal proletariat in a civilization, which is a group of disaffected people who are in a society but not of it, and they wish to secede from the body social, because the creative minority that used to inspire mimesis is now is degenerated into a dominant minority that can only rule by force. And so I'm an internal proletariat of one, just one guy. I'm in this society, but I don't belong in it because I don't believe in it. I'm 100% critical of it. I think it's degenerate and false, and it's failing. And watching our cities sink, you can just turn on the news on any city you want and see the spread of tent cities everywhere, people doing drugs, shitting in the streets. It's a disaster. Clearly, our cities are dying. The West is on the way out. Even though militarily, of course, it's very strong. Although even that, I've heard critics talk about the American military right now being pretty weak. Actually, the vax mandates have driven out a lot of soldiers who would otherwise be there, and the military force is just not as strong as it was. All this wokeism has infected it and effeminized it and made it weak. You can't have an effeminate influence on the military and still expect to have a military. It doesn't work that way. The military is masculine. It is Mars energy by nature, not Venus energy. And this kind of energy weakens the military. So I'm not even sure how strong they are. And I'm not even sure in terms of numbers, what we've got. But Putin's got 200,000 troops there in Ukraine. If we went into Europe right now, we'd probably only be able to send 40,000 troops at most at our disposal to get in there. Not a match for a ground war, which hopefully we won't get into. God forbid, let alone the use of non-strategic nuclear weapons, i.e. tactical weapons, which are low kilotons, low yield, 1 kiloton, 2 to 5, whatever. Hiroshima and Nagasaki were 15 kiloton, 15 to 20. So hopefully it won't get to that, which I doubt, because Putin really has to be careful. And the whole point was initially going in not to harm civilians, to minimize civilian casualties, go after military installations and the media, the communications installations, because he's got to rule over these people. If he wins, they got to be part of Russia, and he's got to be able to get along with them. So he has a vested interest in minimizing civilian casualties. But Zelensky, whom I think is an extraordinarily corrupt and very weak president. He's a weak man, despite how the West is trained to heroize him because of their vested political interests. He's totally weak and corrupt. Ukraine is rife with corruption, and he's part of the whole corrupt, degenerate aspect of Ukraine. And I just think that he told the citizens to take up arms. Once they do that, now they're targets. So the ontology at that point shifted. So you can't minimize civilian casualties if civilians are shooting at you. So now you have to target civilians. So that was Zelensky's fault. That was totally his fault. He's a bad ruler. He doesn't know what he's doing. He'll be easy to topple and to get rid of, which they will do. His days are numbered, in my opinion. So
yeah. And if you just scratch the surface a little bit and, look at Zelensky's life, his past, his bank accounts, it becomes clear, and even a few years ago, it would have been the norm to say that. Now you would be kind of castigated for bringing up what's completely obvious. Do you think that, Russia, I heard that, Putin has distanced himself from a lot of his inner circle, and he's reassigned a couple of his people in the inner circle. And the idea is that there was a miscalculation that this incursion into Ukraine would be, 48 hours, a week tops, that, they would be, greeted as liberators for the most part, and that there was a miscalculation there. Do you think that's the case? And B, do you think that the United States, the West, actually baited Putin right through, they have intellectual warfare that they use, fourth, fifth generational warfare that they use on the West, but we do it as well. So maybe they gave him some information that made him think it would be easy, so we could get into this new geopolitical conflict before you get into the underpinnings of the bomb makers, and the resources that are going to be expended. We just sent them another 800 million. We've sent billions to Ukraine, again, while our cities are dying. Do you think this might have been a bait from the West?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think the whole thing was a bait from the beginning. I mean, the eastward encroachment of NATO, and especially Poland, bringing Poland into NATO. Poland and Russia have been at war forever, all through the medieval period. It's been a back and forth, itchy and scratchy game with Poland and Russia, back and forth. Poland stealing Kiev and Rus after the Mongols invaded and went away. Then Poland took the land, and then Ivan III had to take it back. He took back Kiev and Rus, basically. So that has been a kind of Lithuanian corridor, like in the West, that was fought over ever since Charlemagne's grandsons divided his empire into three corridors, which become France, the Central Europe, and Germany. And then Germany and France have been fighting over ever since. In a certain sense, the Kiev and Rus world, which was a north to south world, extending almost as far as Novgorod, has been fought over by Poland and Russia. So bringing Poland into NATO was not good. That itself was a bait and provocation, because Poland absolutely despises Russia. And it wouldn't take much for them to want to go after them. But they, of course, militarily, they have beefed up. Poland has beefed up its military quite a bit, but not to stand up to Russia. And they know that. So that's why they wanted to send those fighter jets to Ramstein in Germany and have them deal with it. They remember how Catherine the Great, carved up Poland. She went in there and carved it up. They don't want that again. So, but bringing NATO bringing Poland into NATO, I think, was a direct provocation. And then in the Czech Republic as well, Romania, not good. All of which border Ukraine, and then promising at the Bucharest summit in 2007, Ukraine eventual membership, as they clean up their act, was really stupid. It was right after, because they promised both at that summit, they promised both Georgia and Ukraine, and Putin immediately then in 2008 went into Georgia and punished them by taking South Ossetia and Azerbaijan. Georgia's kind of a mess now as a result of that. They'll never be in Ukraine. But part of this too, that people also do not see, is the immunological aspect to this, which is to say these countries have to do with defending Russia's borders. It has to maintain a boundary in the Caucasus Mountains, because Russia has been attacked in the past through the Caucasus by the Turks, for instance. They have gone through so they have a vested interest in maintaining that Georgia is under their influence and that they have a border there. It's a very important. Ukraine too, huge geopolitical strategic reason for annexing Ukraine, because Russia's totally flat, and flat lands are extremely hard to defend. So if you push the borders all the way to the Carpathian Mountains, then you've got the mountains as a natural border, which would include taking all of Ukraine, which probably isn't going to happen. I think they'll just go as far as the Dnieper. But nonetheless, at least the Dnieper is a kind of boundary line. Rivers have very often been boundary lines between nations and states and so forth. So that's the situation. I think that's where we're at. It's at, people aren't seeing this in terms of Russia trying to defend itself by keeping its borders intact, so that it would be like us. With Mexico, there is no border now, pretty much under the Biden administration with Mexico. That we're naked right now. Consequently, we have all these cartel elements coming across the border with AK-47s and machine guns. There's shootouts in the suburbs of Houston right now. All kinds of incredible atrocities as a result of getting rid of our southern border. So to Russia, that is their southern border, the border with Eastern Ukraine. That is their southern border, and they're not about to leave it open. They're not going to do that. So
yeah, there have been more deaths in Houston in the last year than in Baltimore. I think we're in
it's degenerate. It's a mess.
Just like that.
Houston used to be a nice place. So apparently, don't move to Houston now. You can cross off another American city not to move to.
There's a lot of those happening lately. Just to stay a little bit longer on the West here. So where would you say sovereignty lies with regards to the West? Where are the decisions made? Because it's not Biden. Where are the decisions being made?
That's a good question, actually. I've been asking myself that the whole time since Biden got into office. Who actually is in charge here?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't seem like him. He's too old, senile, and feeble to possibly be coming up with these policies. So it's in his staff, and his staff is a collection of totally incompetent individuals like Mayorkas, Victoria Nuland,
Buttigieg. Yeah.